And so I feel like that has also been a lesson for me in staying attentive and continuing to listen to what is life asking of me now? What is life asking of me now? And what is life asking of me now? And it doesn't matter what your 5-year plan or 10-year plan is when you're approaching life from this perspective, which I know can be very uncomfortable and scary for people because there's a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of ambiguity. But that's what also happens in the experience after loss anyway, is you live in this in between and you are in an unknown and life is totally mysterious. And it's like you've been activated into this portal of mystery for a period of time.
Welcome. This podcast is called We Are All Dying, and I'm your host, Jenna Goodhand. And I'm hoping through these conversations, we can gain insight, lessons, experiences that will change our lives and what is left of them. In this conversation today, I speak with Gloria Eid about the death of her father, anticipatory grief, movement, and how it allows us to move through grief, and all the lessons in between. Thanks for joining us. Welcome, Gloria. I am so grateful to have you here with me today in this space.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
I'd like to start our conversation today with something that you wrote that I pulled from your Instagram. Whew.
Okay.
Ready?
Yes.
It is a challenge every day to stay in your heart when it hurts to be there, but there's nothing else to achieve right now. There is no other goal but to be with my heart. This is an uncomfortable truth I know is resting in the depths of me. And with time, I hope I can access it more and more.
Wow, that's so fascinating to hear it read out loud.
Right? Do you want to share, if you can, the moments and the movements you were feeling in your life when you wrote that?
Yes. That was probably 2019, a few months after my dad died from pancreatic cancer. And it was essentially 6 months from his diagnosis to his death. So it was, although there was time, still felt quite quick. And it was my processing around, I think, just what we were talking about earlier before we opened up here, is like how to live through and in the aftermath of loss. Before my dad died, I the perspective that I had around life was like, live fully, give it your all, like think positive, be positive. And I remember at that time of writing, none of those philosophies or teachers or concepts really rung true anymore. I felt like they were flawed and I felt like they were missing something. And that was a bit of my reconciling of like, no, there's something more here. And how do we live in the nuance of keeping it together when things have fallen apart? And not to say that like I needed to keep things together or I needed to present as a particular way, but it's actually like simply getting through life. Like that's what I meant by keeping it together. And how do we do that when it's so much easier in the depth of grief to shut off and to close off and to turn your heart off. And in my experience, in those early months of grieving and experiencing life after my dad died, I felt a lot. Like I couldn't help it. I'm also a feeler. I'm also in the same breath of me seeing, the bright side to things, or not even the bright side, but like just the like different perspectives to things, like trying really hard not to hold one truth all the time, but seeing that there could be multiple truths at once. So what I also, in those early months of grief, I was actually like also feeling a lot, and I couldn't help myself to feel. And that piece of writing was also my like honoring of that, where it's like I'm not I want to stay present. I want to stay conscious through this experience of grieving. And I don't know exactly where that comes from. It could just have been my disposition where I've been in the world of like human transformation for a really long time. And I see really the purpose of living is to evolve. Like, let's grow our souls, let's grow our hearts while we're here. And perhaps I brought that into my experience with death and losing my dad. So that's a bit of, I guess, the background. And I've never even thought of it. So like you asked me this question and I don't know, like, and it's a beautiful question because it's interesting to go back to what was I moving through, or what was inspiring these pieces of writing that I did a lot of actually through that time. It was a very healing practice for me to document and to write. Yeah.
And I think, grief is like, there's such an evolution of it. There's so many stages. And, it was 2019 because I looked at the date. And so I was like, okay, so there have been years since this. How does this resonate in where you are with your grief? There's a term that you mentioned a couple times, anticipatory grief. So the grief of someone who, we're all going to die, but their death is coming. You may know how it's coming. And so that place in between them being here and dying. Can you speak a little bit about like what your experience with that is and how you've come to maybe understand it a little bit more since
Yeah. I think what's really important to say here, and what I don't know is acknowledged so much in the world of death and loss and preparing to lose someone, especially in the imminent time of death. And that's how we can distinguish it, right? It's like, oh, the death is imminent. Like we are aware of it and it's inevitable in a particular time frame. Whereas in any other situation, yes, we're all dying, but that piece of information is very deeply unknown and is a mystery completely. So when I first learned of my dad's diagnosis, I was living across the country. My family's in Toronto. I was in Vancouver. And I got, it was actually a few days before I got the call where I had a chat with my dad, and he was telling me that he was experiencing some like really terrible pain, like pain that he hadn't felt before in his like abdomen area and in his back. He's like, I don't know, but this is something that I really do need to go back to my doctor to look at. And so when he did, it was just a couple days after that call, his family doctor told him to go and get scans, x-rays, testing. It was, bad enough to do that. And that's when they had discovered the mass. And that's what we were told. It was described as a mass. And that was the first time I heard the word. That was the first time, like, I was like, okay, a mass equals what? In his pancreas. Okay, like, and my mom had called me to tell me, and yeah, all of this like terminology, this medical terminology that was totally beyond me and beyond all of us, because we're a family that thankfully, gratefully has not experienced time in the medical system or in, yeah. So this was our first exposure into it, this in depth. So we received the diagnosis. I was on the other side of the country, and I realized that I needed to decide on how I was going to show up to this now. My immediate, thoughts were, okay, I guess I just gotta drop everything here, go back home, be there, figure it out. Like, we were also told on the phone. I think my mom had told me like, yeah, the prognosis is 3 to 6 months, something. So it's like I learned this information really, really quickly and really early on. So it's like, oh my gosh, okay, yes, drop everything, move back. But that just isn't realistic, sometimes reasonable, sometimes even the best thing. And so I became more of a long distance caretaker. And two things that I want to touch on is that experience, like the long distance caretaking, sort of what it allowed. And the second is my own grieving of self. That was also part of my anticipatory grief. We don't seem to realize or talk about the fact that when we are aware of somebody important in our life dying, that also brings out in us who we are going to be as a result of that and what parts of ourselves we are losing. And it's very easy to think of that as a selfish act, like my dad is dying, like he's got cancer, he's in so much pain, and now I'm thinking about like how my life is going to be and like what I'm supposed to do with like these next several months, and like all the travel and the back and forth, and do I quit my job, do like all of these things, and then also just like having to deal with it at the particular, like with all of these, being a high achiever, being a go-getter, being like, okay, like I'm doing my life, to just have this experience sort of change my course for a period of time. And I think also that's what death allows us in our human experience. It's like there's a narrative where we see death and dying as like quite linear, like it happens in old age, and then anything that doesn't happen in old age is wrong. It shouldn't have been. It's not fair. And also when it happens in old age, we can still feel all of those experiences and those feelings and sentiments as well. But then we also feel like, well, it's more valid here. So then we dismiss our feelings towards it. So it's like a catch-22, and it's a rock and a hard place all the time. And I think what was helpful for me, I'm jumping around a lot here, I realize, but what's helpful for me, we'll make a thread soon, was like coming to over these last few years, realizing that the experience of death being nonlinear is actually a gift to help us wake up to and shake us out of our linear life and our linear thinking and this like sort of routine expectation of what we're supposed to experience in life to be successful. It's like if it just comes at any given time, what's left for us is to be really present to the now, because that is what we've got. So that took time, like that took, only recent in the last year that I've kind of come to see that, death it does not discriminate, and that it's by design. It's by design to just occur at any time in our life. And then we are left to, I guess, decide, or it's not really matter. It doesn't seem to me like a matter of what we do as a result of the death. I think that's also some stuff in the narrative around like creating purpose from pain, and we don't have to do that either. But I think so the form of what happens after we experience loss is not as important as how we intend to live more true to us. I think for me, it was an invitation for me to be really relentless with how I want to live my life, what I want to prioritize, staying present, feeling, because feeling is healing. For me, that's what I learned through my grieving process, is to feel this all and to detach from how quick or how much or when will this end, etc. Was just like it helped my process. I think like it was a practice for me to stay present to everything. And in the act of doing that, I think I've been able to see some helpful perspective now that I'm not in the acute grieving period anymore. The anticipatory grief around like my identity and myself was just like important to name, I think, and give time to myself to honor. Like, wow, I'm not even 30 and I'm not going to have my dad anymore. Okay. Or like reconciling with not having the kind of relationship. I just felt like at that time we were just beginning to become friends, you know, where it was like, oh, I'm not seeing him as like, you know, father anymore, but there's a bit of distance. I've grown up. I felt like there was more relatability. Like we were just getting somewhere, you know, and then this all happened. And I remember upon his dying process, I was like, I'm not willing to have this relationship end now. Like I wasn't ready for that. Like I'm not done. So in the years following, in the months following, it's been and it will continue to be exploration of how do I continue a relationship that feels good and keeps me connected and helps me heal and, you know, say the things and bring him into things that I actually don't know that it's funny. I almost feel like we can get closer to the person that has died after they've gone in a weird way. Like there's opportunity to just be really, really creative with what that relationship can look like. And that can also be a healing and a processing for us too. So that's a bit of where I'm at. And I circled around a lot.
Yeah. Well, I had this question about, you know, how have you loved your dad differently since he's died? And you kind of just touched on it a little bit. Is there anything else that kind of comes up with that question?
Mm.
That allowed you to love him differently, or yeah, even I mean, the distance is now it almost doesn't exist because he.
That's right.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if he's in Toronto or Vancouver.
Yeah. I just hold him in the highest regard now. Like I think like um when I think about how he continues to support me, that's what I think of. I think like, oh, he's my cheerleader. I can call on him for guidance, for support, for encouragement, for affirmation. And he was like that when he was here. Like although we didn't have a super close connection physically, you know, like because I wasn't there at home, like I left at 18, I traveled around the world, I moved across the country. That also influenced like the amount that we talked and spoke to one another. But anytime I did come home and in those small visits, he was just so excited, just so happy. Like this is the memories that I have. Like he was just happy to see me. And he was always supportive of his daughters and whatever. Like it was like he just trusted us, you know, to like do our thing. And which is very different from my mom. It's very different. But he was that kind of like character to me in my life and just very consistent growing up. Like I just knew like he went to work, he did the errands, I'd find him doing some house things, like he'd be on the couch watching TV, you know, it was just very like he was the consistent grounding, almost like peacekeeper of the household with 4 women and him. It was intense. And I still see him like that. And anything beyond that, like I I don't need to reconcile, I guess, so much. I think that would be different depending on the person. Like I can't say that as easily with my mom, for instance. Like when she dies, I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of healing and processing and work for myself that I'll have to do around like expectations and like, you know, what I received and what I wished for and like all of these things. And I knowing this now, it gives me an opportunity to be attentive to that and aware of the times where that could be possible here when we're both here. But I can also like accept and acknowledge that it doesn't have to all be done now, right? Like there can be some of this work left to take care of when we're in different dimensions and planes.
What is the work in the early days now that you have some distance from just how like I don't even know the words for those early days where you're just keeping the little light on that you can, right? And there's few things that probably anyone can say, and you're kind of, even if you're surrounded, you're kind of by yourself, right? Is that kind of how you felt? Like just sort of like, yeah. For those listening, for those who are experiencing it, or when we experience it again, what are some things that we can do in those early days that with time and distance you can see will help you in the journey? Are there things that maybe you wouldn't have done to yourself?
Yeah.
Time, grace, kindness.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I remember and like it was probably the next day I was back on Instagram and I was scrolling and I was seeing all of these posts that just got me so angry, like posts like, you know, build your business and like you know, all of these just like go after it and blah blah blah. And I was like, none of this fucking matters. Like none of this matters. I really felt that. I was like, what? Like you people don't even get it. Like, hello, my dad just died and here you are talking about your like building your businesses and like this is what you need to do to like blah blah blah. Like, ugh. So I had that. I was like, none of this matters. At the same time, I know that all of this matters. So how am I going to take care of myself as best as I can? And there's a lot of lessons, like, and there's some things that I would actually do differently. Um, what I know what was really helpful for me is like I mean I cried a lot, uncontrollably, couldn't even help it. Um, and at that time in those first few months, I honestly did not think that I could feel different. Like I remember talking to somebody and being like, I actually don't know, like, how will I not be this sad anymore? I felt so sad. And then, you know, 4 years later, I can tell you there becomes more space. And the sadness sort of lives inside instead of you living inside of the sadness. But I just let myself cry. I'm also very fortunate that at the time the work that I was in was remote. And actually, interestingly, I was at this period of work where I was about to enter a new role. And to enter the new role meant that we sort of had to wait for vacation days to add up, like over the course of the following year. And so I knew that if I take this role, I'm not going to have vacation time for a little bit. So I actually requested to have a complete month off of leave in the month of May in 2019. And I did this in like early April. And I had intentions for going back to visit family, maybe to take a little trip somewhere, etc. And what happened was on maybe the first day of my trip in California, I got a call from my sister saying the nurse told us that, like, you know, dad is at his final days. It's probably best that you come back now. And I said, oh, well, just in 5 days, I have my flight from here back home. Like I can, like I'm scheduled to come back. And she said, no, she's saying that there's probably not even going to be that many days. So then I took a flight back immediately, and was with him. We were all at home with him as he passed. It was like a 5-day active dying process. And so what had happened after that, so that was the start of May, the first week of May, I had this whole month off already planned, and I like thank the universe for that preparation. So that was when I actually took care of a lot of administration. And I would say that, you know, it is a lot of, it's still a lot of shock in those first few weeks. And because there is actually so much to do, for me, I was very focused on that, like taking care of paperwork, submitting the wills, calling the government. Like there's so much death administration that we are not aware of. Um, and I spent a lot of time taking care of that, which was stressful, but also helpful because it felt like I was contributing and honoring and still, you know, connected to my dad in some way, like taking care of his affairs. After that, like shortly after that, I went back to Vancouver and I was alone, you know, not with family anymore. And that's when it felt like, okay, moving forward now. It's this is my real life beginning now again. And without my dad, like I know that every new person that I meet from here on out is going to experience me without my dad. When I'm sitting in the coffee shops and I see people, which I'd love to do and I had done all the time, I'm sitting in the coffee shops and I'm seeing people walk by and dad and daughter, or, you know, young parent in there and their little one, or two friends chatting. And it's like, wow, life is just going on. People running for the bus. Like it was very dreamlike. It's very like foggy. And I sat and I wrote a lot. Like I had my journal and I would just express and write to my grief and write from grief and try to understand a little bit more of what this new emotion is in this context. I've lost people before, but it's never been someone so immediate and close to me, and a parent, which is like, you know, can be very loaded. So anyway, did a lot of writing, spent time in nature, which was a lifeline for me. I walked all the time. And I feel like a lot of these things were like part of my life and my habits anyway, but they were just magnified when it came to that, you know? So it's like I really just walked and walked and walked and walked an hour to 2 hours every day. Lucky to be in Vancouver for that kind of ability. Journaled a lot, spent time with friends. And what I could have done better was actually asking people for what I needed, even though it's so hard to know what you need. And like, even that question in the early days is like, I don't know what I need. I don't know, but like, I'm sad and I just want to be sad. And I don't actually know what will be helpful. But probably something around eating, because I really didn't, like, you know, like I would just let my plates pile up. And I'm very grateful that I had friends who were just more assertive with their invitations or the requests for supporting me. I had friends check in, I had friends come over and do the dishes for me. They would sit as I would like tidy up my place. The basic things are hard to do, but they are probably like the most important. And if that's all you do, that is sufficient, like that is enough. So I probably would have, and it's very vulnerable also to like make these asks too, but I probably would have reached out to my circle of friends and just said, this is what could be helpful, or this is where I'm struggling right now. And if you are willing or have the capacity to offer help, like I would gladly take it here.
when for you did you feel like maybe some parts of yourself you thought had gone quiet or you would never be able to connect to again? When did those sort of show themselves, and what can you attribute that to? Is it just time? Is it, something that you chose to do for yourself? Is there a moment, a conversation, a book?
Mm.
Is there something that sort of, you know, um, brought you to a more hopeful place, I guess, that life could still have beauty and joy and celebration, even if at the same time you still have sadness
Mm.
and loss?
There was a time, I'm just remembering now as you say this, where it must have been like the first day or the first week that I didn't think of my dad. So it was like months later. And I remember getting scared by that. And I don't really know what that was about, like the fear. But if I'm just like talk out loud around it, it must have been something like, if I don't think about my dad, like, will I forget him? And I didn't want to forget him. And this idea of like having a day gone by and noticing a day went by that I didn't think about him, like, what does that mean? And it was scary, but I think what was happening at that time, and I can't know for sure when that happened, it must have been like maybe around the 6 month mark or something, um where I suppose what was happening was like more space was being created. Um, and it still was uncomfortable. Like I remember actually at around that time when the 6 months hit me, it's like I was walking vividly. I remember walking back towards my apartment and like wanting to throw up on the side of the road, where it's like 6 months has gone by and like he's actually not coming back. Like this is wild to me. So I think just like having a little bit of space to recognize these things might have been the same time where I was maybe even unconsciously preparing to allow like new feelings in. Um, but it's so cyclical, Jenna. I actually don't think that there's parts of me that have come back exactly. Like I feel irrevocably changed. Like I there was a Gloria before this and there's a Gloria after, and I love all versions. um but I feel different. Like I just feel like I'm different, that there's a perspective to life that I have now that I didn't have before. That there's an awareness, there's a consciousness of something beyond this that I didn't have before, that I wasn't asked to think about, or um I didn't really need to decide what to believe in, because it didn't really impact or influence my day to day. But like after my dad dying, I was left to like actually choose a belief and choose a kind of belief around death that's going to support me in order to live, which is how I wanted to live, which was fully expressed and in touch and with joy. And what I know is like to experience joy, you got to feel the sorrow. You need to stay aware, like and listen and be observant. And um, part of what allowed me to do that and what still allows me to do that is movement. It's like dancing and moving my body. That I think was also really telling in terms of my capacity being built after that. It was when I felt able to like actually exercise again and move my body and like produce that higher energy state. So I remember there were just times where I would be lying on the floor and I just have my feet up and they would be dancing. It's like my legs were just dancing. Or I'd be lying on the floor and I just have my arms up and they just be like dancing to the music because the rest of my body couldn't. And so there was something around this idea of like moving is healing. And this was all unconscious. I just felt where I was being led, you know. And over time, I discovered like, dancing was really healing for me, moving, expressing, letting the energy flow through the body. And I discovered a practice called grief movement. And it is basically like movement or kind of like yoga, but just done from the chair. So you don't have to be lying down on a mat. Like it's just all like here and now. We could go through some grief movement practices that just allow the energy to flow through and release and let go. And there's different sorts of postures that we can take depending on what it is that we're feeling or that we want to release. So is it sadness? Is it anger? Is it peace or forgiveness? And so I went through that practice myself and training myself. And I I I enjoy using movement as a way of healing, and I hope that through that training I can, teach others or bring other people through an experience like that, which is just so simple and it's just like so loving and kind and gentle, and it's really just all an invitation to let the energy of the grief move. And part of what I think part of where we get stuck when it comes to our grief is that we don't let it move through the body. So the experiences of numbing or the experiences of um, avoiding or blocking or ignoring, like all of that keeps it locked in us. That ends up, like maybe staying with us unnecessarily or in unhealthy ways. But I think there's also this fear that if we were to let go of the grief, as I was going back to, then we lose the person. And I I don't see that as true. I see that we can actually hold the person with a lot more love and grace and memory. And we can hold ourselves with those things too, in the face of something so tragic. And isn't that, for me, like, that's such a more beautiful, inspiring way to experience something so terrible, something that we would never want to experience, that we would never wish on someone else. So just do it with love. Yeah.
You've given some really great insight into so many things. And I'm wondering if there's something that we haven't touched on that you want to leave people with. If there's like a message that you've found or experienced through your own grief that you want others to hear that could give them comfort, hope,
Yeah.
anything. Is there something, that you want to kind of be the takeaway?
What's coming up for me now, and I know that there are so many messages that I've come across and that I've held on to throughout, but what I think really summarizes it all for me is in the early stages, you live inside grief. So your whole life is sort of in this bubble of grieving and seeing the world from this lens of I've lost. And at some time, at some point, you stop living inside the grief and then the grief lives inside of you. And I think that's what I meant by like being irrevocably changed and just seeing life from a perspective that I will never not have anymore, is like there's a piece of me that has been opened the grief I don't live in anymore, but I experience, and it can be accessed in an instant and still comes up 4 years later in entirely new ways. And so it's like, I guess the message is, it's not wrong. Like, it's not, what else is there to do but to have a piece of you that is like always constantly grieving and thinking about and imagining this person or whomever, whatever we've lost. I feel like it's really valid.
So, Glow, what is one thing you want to do before you die?
So this is another thing that I think losing my dad and grief has done to me, is that for better or worse, I've felt like I've actually become a lot less ambitious in the way that I used to see getting things done in my life before. And so honestly, like, I hear that question and I think to myself, like, I can die tomorrow and I will be happy. Like, I'm satisfied. So I want to just say that, where it's like, I feel like that needs to be named, where it's like, I, before I die, like, I don't know, anything would feel good because I know that I've been choosing it, you know. And like, so seeing the ocean again, or dipping into the water, or I don't know, eating tacos, or laughing with friends, like all of these things would be lovely to do before I die, and really like make the most of this last activity. Maybe, yeah, for me, it's less about what it is that what's one thing to do before I die, and more about like, what is like the themes or the activities, or like the energy I want to experience. You know, I love to write. I would love for writing to be something that I do and share publicly more often, maybe in bigger ways. I want to teach, like, there's I feel like there's wisdom, there's knowledge, there's information that I have through my own lived experiences, that by using my life as a parable for a heightening consciousness in the world and in others, is something that I would love to do. I don't know how necessarily. And actually, what death has taught me is to not be attached to form. So, as you know, there were a couple years, 2020 to 2022, where I was writing a book. It was a memoir. A lot of it was inspired from this period of time, but also just before it, where I had let go of a whole kind of career track and identity. And my book was telling the story of who we are beyond our work, and developing self-trust, and how to do that, and the process that I went through at that time. And I wrote, towards a book, because that's what I thought it should be, or I don't know, like, it just felt like it's good to have form when we're developing goals, or when we're working towards something. But then in the process, I realized, like, I've written all that I could write about this, and it's not done. I know, like, I stare at the whole material and I'm like, this is incomplete, but I have to put it down now, because what I felt was happening was the book was telling me to live into my next chapter. It's not done for a reason, because there's still more to be written. And so I feel like that has also been a lesson for me in staying attentive and continuing to listen to, what is life asking of me now? What is life asking of me now? And what is life asking of me now? And it doesn't matter what your 5-year plan or 10-year plan is when you're approaching life from this perspective, which I know can be very uncomfortable and scary for people because there's a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of ambiguity. But that's what also happens in the experience after loss anyway, is you live in this in between and you are in an unknown and life is totally mysterious. And it's like you've been activated into this portal of mystery for a period of time. And what could it be like if your relationship to life was just like that always? Actually, what sort of courage could be activated? What sort of trust can be activated? What sort of presence and love can be activated? Gratitude can be activated. Like, I think it's that I'm way more concerned about, that whatever I do as my life goes on, does it come from the orientation of these virtues, these values being true to me?
Thank you so much for sharing in this time with me and sharing of
Thanks,
yourself
Jenna.
with the world.
Oh, I'm so grateful for the conversation. And I just love that you're doing this. And as we said earlier, like, it's time and it's so important that this is being brought into the culture more. Yeah, anything that I can do to help, I'm always here. It's so good to chat.